Shimon or Chaim Tzvi's father, I guess, or what?
Chaim Tzvi's father does have COVID. Yeah. Chaim Tzvi's father does have COVID.
Oh, he does. Hey.
Yisrael Moshe ben Yente Gittel, Yisrael Shlema, and Shimon Yehuda ben Rivka, Yisrael Shlema, and Yaakov Shmuel ben Chana, Yisrael Shlema. No, before Yisrael. Okay, so we are up to Chaf Hamad Beis, 3 lines from the bottom, and we're back in to the sugya of Avelos. Amemar Shochav Lei Bar Barei. Amemar lost a grandchild, the son of a son. Kara Iluya, he writes Kriya. So you see, he was fearing Zechavelos not only for his son, but for his son's son. Also, Bray, his son came. So he made Kriya even not in front of his son. So you see, like the Friedrich Rashita, who holds that even Shneim, you have to write Kriya for. Also, Beret, then his son came, Kara Bape, and he writes Kriya a second time together with his son. Rasha also Beret, Hadar Amemar Kara Bape de Beret. Then he writes Kriya a second time in front of his son. and the third time, then Itkar, the Meyusha, Kara. Then he remembered that when he writes Kriya, he was sitting, Kam Kara Ma'umet, he writes Kriya a third time, Rashi's Pam Shlishis. There's a lot. I'm sure the people who sell clothing love this.
Was it on the same baguette or a different baguette?
It was. I'm not sure. It sounds like it was the same baguette. So he burned through 3 begodim. I'm not sure why the Bluetooth is not connected. Let me connect it. 1 second. I want to connect the speaker, otherwise no one can hear you. 1 second. Okay. Now we're connected. The speaker was not connected. When it's not connected, nobody in the room can hear. But now it's connected. Okay, so that's what happened. So Rashi says that there were 3 kriyas going on. Tosfos brings a different shita. So let's see Tosfos. Also, Barei Karabape. He wanted to show solidarity with the son, to be noig avelos with him, and that's why Amemar writes kriya again with his son. The Temer Tosfos. Even the kfar, he already had to write kriya. The whole shayla that we had before was: do you have to write kriya on shneim? Do you have to be misabel on shneim, or maybe only in front of your karev? But who holds that if you actually write kriya independent, that you would have to do it again in front of the karev? That's extreme. Maybe the reason why Amemar did it is not because he really needed to, but he wanted to demonstrate that you're supposed to fear zich with avelis in front of the actual oven. The raw pirish, also break her ba'apei. The reason why Amemar writes kriya a second time together with his son is lefi Amemar kora miyushin. Amemar, when he writes kriya on his own, he did it while he was sitting down. Thank you so much, Matthew. He did it while he was sitting down. But also, and his son just told him, Tati, you're not allowed to write kriya sitting, you have to write kriya standing. So the second kriya that he did again, that was b'mu'umid. But kriya is also b'noi shalom meimar, while yidei kach niskar meimar v'kar pam shni mu'umid. So, in fact, he didn't write kriya 3 times, like Rashi says, or like Tosfos says in his first draft. All that happened is a Memar, when he writes kriya on his own, he writes kriya sitting down. His son reminded him that he's supposed to write kriya standing up, and that's why he writes kriya a second time. Thank you very much. Okay, so to more about it. Kriya the moment we know. How do you know that Kriya has to be while one is standing? It's talking about when Eoy lost his family. So Eoy stood up and he tore his mail. So that's how we know that Kriya has to be moved. If that's a raya, when it says by Yibum, Amad v'Amar, Loi chafati lekachta, Hachanami, are you telling me that the chalitza has to be done standing? Because it says Amad v'Amar. But Tanya, we learned that chalitza does not have to be done standing. We learned bein Yoshiv, bein Oimed, bein Moita, sitting, standing, or leaning. Amar lei, so he answered, so Amemar answered, Hosam loiksiv vayamoid, by Eoy it says vayokum, and he stood up. That's a lashon to tell you that you have to stand. There it says v'amad. V'amad is not such a strong expression of standing, and that's why you don't have a raya that you'd have to stand by chalitza. But by avelus, it does say by Eoy vayokum. Hosam loiksiv vayamoid. Vayomer. So it says v'amad v'amar. It doesn't say vayomer vayomer. Hachakšiv vayokom vayik. So that's why we learned for Avelis by Kriya.
Maybe that was a minig Amori. He wasn't even Jewish. I'm surprised. Why are we learning halachas from
Eoy?
Yeah, Eoy. He may not even have existed according to.
So the Gemara actually holds just like you. So let's see what it says. Amar Rami Lachama, Minayin the Kriyashim, Amar Shem Vayokom Yavikra. Frank the Gemara, what's Machlal the raya from there? Dilma Milsa Yaserta Hu David. How could you bring a raya from Eoy? That's what he do for Avelis. Maybe that's what he did. Just because he did it, how is that a raya? And that's what everybody has to do. The Loite Mahachi. And if you're not going to say that that's what Eoy did, but you don't have necessarily a raya, that's what you have to do by Avelis. And if you, in other words, if you're not going to agree with me that you cannot bring a raya from Eoy, and rather you're going to argue that you could bring a raya from Eoy, well, then we're going to have more halachas to learn from Eoy. Because it also says, Vayagas is Roishai. He pulled his hair out. So are you going to learn Hachanami? Are you going to learn that just like by Eoy, he tore his hair out, so too every oval has to tear his hair out? Ella mehacha. You don't have any raya from Eoy at all. So the Gemara abandons the raya from Eoy. And the Gemara now focuses on David HaMelech. David HaMelech is more appropriate to bring a raya lalacha from. But Yokam HaMelech v'yikras begodav. I believe this is when Amnon died. He writes Kriya. For Gemara, maybe David HaMelech as well. But Dilma Milsa Yaserta of it. Maybe David HaMelech was doing, was expressing more sorrow than is actually required by the halacha. And I'll bring you a raya that is such a sorrow. It says Vayishkav Arza. It says that David HaMelech sat on the floor. Hachanami, are you going to say that an oval has to sit mamish on the floor, has to lie on the floor? But Tanya, Yoshev al gabe mita, al gabe kisai, al gabe udaini, lo yotzo yidei chevosai. Zokt Rashi. Udaini is a machteshes. It's sitting on top of some type of a grinder. Shenachamo. The Dilma Milsa Yisheita, maybe he did something extra. If you're not going to say that, Vayishkav Arza, it says that David HaMelech lied on the floor. Hachanami, are you going to say that's also a chiyuv to sit mamish on the floor? Vatanya Yoshav al gabe mita, al gabe kisai, al gabe udani, lo yotzi yidei chayvasai. V'om Rabbi Yochanan, and Rabbi Yochanan said, what does it mean lo yotzi yidei chayvasai? Shalekayim kfiyas hamita. But yet, in other words, you have to, in order to do kfiyas hamita, you have to turn the bed over and be on the bed upside down. Which means that he did more than that. He said a mamish on the floor. Amalei, no, ke'ein arza. He actually did kviyas hamita. But it's ke'ein arza. Which means he turned his bed over and he sat on it. So Dr. Gemara, you really do have a right from David HaMelech. And you don't say that he did an extra thing. You say that he did what was halacha. You're going to ask me, it says Vayishkav Arza, and you're not supposed to, that's not how you do Kviyas Hamita. Kviyas Hamita is turning over the bed. Dr. Gemara, Ke'en Arza, when it says Vayishkav Arza, that's what it means. It means that he did Kviyas Amita, and it was like he was sitting on the floor. Now, it's interesting to note, if we would turn over our beds, it wouldn't be like we're sitting on the floor. Their beds were made that if you turned them over, you'd be sitting on the floor, because their beds didn't have bedposts that went up above the level of a mattress. So if you turned it over, you were literally on the floor. Mashenka, our beds, if we would turn it over, the headboards and the backboards would raise the bed, and it would not be on the floor, unless you had a high riser or something. So that makes a big nafkamina. Why? Tosha says, very interesting. The loy tema hachi, so I'm on the second Tosha. Avogab the b'shach of artzuksev nami etzel. That's fatter. I want to go right over here. No, it's not this Tosha. Tosha speaks about why we don't have. Oh, here it is. Tosha speaks about why we don't have Kviyas Amita nowadays. So here it is. 1 second. So it brings down over here. So I'm in the long toises, the able the third toises on the Amid, and I'm about 8 lines up from the skinny lines. Even if our beds are turned over, they'll still be raised off the ground because our 4 bedposts or a headboard and footboard will still raise the mattress off the ground. You know why? We have 4 bedposts, just like the legs. So therefore, if you turn the bed over, it won't be on the floor. So that's one of the svaras that Tosha says why nowadays Avelim don't do Kviyas Amita, because our beds are built in such a way where it wouldn't work. And to tell you that you should sleep directly on the floor, we see from the Gemara you're not supposed to, because the Vayishkav Arzo was what the Gemara asked on from David HaMelech. Tanu Rabban, the following things are also for an Abel to do. Also b'melacha, an Abel is not allowed to do melacha, like we learned. Uberechitza is not allowed to bathe. Ubesicha is not allowed to shmir. Ubetashmish Amita, he's not allowed to be intimate. Ubeni'ilas a sandal and wearing leather shoes. The also licorice b'toira ubenevim ubeksubim uleshanois b'mishnah b'medrash ubehalochos ubetalmud ubeagados. He's not supposed to learn. Yimhoyu rabim trichin loy, but let's say he's a tarov, he's a dayan, and people need him to answer shilas, or he's a rabbi that he has to teach. Then ein nimna, he doesn't hold back. Umaisa umais benoisho Rabbi Yosy b'tzipurei and nichnas lebeis hamedrash v'darish koyim kulay. Rabbi Yosy said the regular shiurim because he was needed. Let's see Rashi. Rashi says, Rashi reminds us, how do we know that you're not allowed to learn? Because they're ill. So the Hanagdoim means be quiet. Okay? Then he says, Rabbi Shrichel the drasha. If everybody needs him to say the drasha, then he is allowed to continue saying kishir. Rabbi Barbachana is Rabbi Milsa. He had to suffer in avails. So he thought the loyal make he won't go say shir while he was sitting shiva. Amalei Rav, so Rav told him, Tanina, we learned if the rabbin needs him to say the shir, he doesn't refrain. So Sovar, okay, now once I'm going to say shir already, I'm going to do it right, the conventional way, the way I normally do it. He wanted to also set up a turgaman. Rashi says the Gemara is a turgaman, meaning when the Rosh Hashiva used to say the shtickle, he would say it to the person with the booming voice, and the person with the booming voice would say it over loud and clear. Zok to Gemara, Amalei Rav, no, that's not good. That's too much. Tanya, he's not allowed to set up a turgaman. He's got to do it a little differently. Of it. So exactly how should he give the shir without a turgaman? And this is what he did. He went into the Beis Hamedrash, and when Nichnas Reb Chananya ben Akavya v'Yoshav v'tzidon, and Reb Chananya ben Akavya came and sat beside Rabbi Yehuda bar Eloi. V'lo chashu l'Reb Chananya ben Akavya. Rabbi Yehuda bar Eloi whispered his shir to Reb Chananya ben Akavya. Reb Chananya ben Akavya l'Turgaman, and Reb Chananya ben Akavya said it to the Turgaman, the Turgaman Shmuel Rabbin. So he didn't directly speak to the Turgaman. Rather, he first said over the Shir to Reb Hanania ben Akavia, who then passed it on to the Turgaman. I guess using a Turgaman is not Avelis. I'm not sure what's the lack of Avelis because you're using a Turgaman. Maybe it's I don't know. It's broadcasting it too much. But he went through a third party. So hopefully they got the Shir right. I guess he knew that Hanania ben Akavia would say it over perfectly. Tanuraban. Oval. Gimel Yamim Rishonim Osher Lo Nichtzil. The first 3 days, he's not allowed to put on tefillin. Let's see if Rashi says anything about this. Rashi says, no, there's no Rashi. Okay? First 3 days, you're not allowed to put on tefillin. Mishlishi ve'elach, from the third day and on, ushlishi v'chalal, and the third day is included in the klal, so it really means only the first 2 days he can't wear tefillin, because the third day already he can wear tefillin. Muter lo nich tefillin. V'imbo panim chadashos. What happens if someone came and sees him sitting there as a noble wearing tefillin? Eina cholos. He doesn't have to take it off. Divrei Rabbi Eliezer. Rashi says, "V'imbo panim chadashos b'yom gimel on the third day. Afilu achi eina cholos tefillin." He still does not take the tefillin off because he doesn't have to worry. This guy might think that he's in the first couple of days and he's not allowed to wear tefillin. Even though maybe the person who comes will think, hey, if he's wearing tefillin today, maybe he wore tefillin the first 2 days when he wasn't allowed. You don't need to worry about that. You could continue wearing your tefillin. But Rabbi Shua argues and says, Ovel, Beis Yamim Harishonim Ashar Tefillin. It's only also from to wear tefillin the first 2 days. And Misheni Veilach, Misheni Bechlal, Muter Lo Nich Tefillin. Already on the second day, you're allowed to wear tefillin. And Rashi says very important that Rabbi Shua says the Ikra Veilus Eino Elo Yemach. The main Avelis is really only 1 day. So that jives with what Dr. Goldar said, right? The first day of Avelis is a separate type of Avelis. But there, Rabbi Yeshua holds already that if someone comes on the second day and sees you wearing tefillin, he might think you wore tefillin on the first day as well. You should take the tefillin off. Omar Masna, my time with Rabbi Eliezer. Why would someone think? I guess
I understand. Isn't tefillin a deraisa and avelis is a drabanon? These are many of them are just minhagim and not halachas.
So first, there are those who hold that avelis on the first day is deraisa, but but it's still a kasha because you should still say it's not even a loisa said, even if it's a deraisa. So that say should be loisa said that you should still wear tefillin. You shouldn't wear tefillin. But don't we have a pasuk? We brought psukim from Yecheskel that it's a pe'er, you're not supposed to have pe'er. We actually have psukim to say that you're not supposed to wear tefillin. Now I understand. So Mati's asking very good. Everybody knows that on the second day, on the third day, on the fourth day, you're allowed to wear tefillin. So why would someone think that I'm wearing tefillin today that I wore it yesterday? Unless people can get mixed up from one day to the next. 2 days, people don't mix up. So someone might think it's your first day. But that's correct. But you're asking why that even? So vice versa, I guess from the first day, people will get mixed up. That's what they've told you. That's not the rest. Yeah. No, he's asking the first day or the first 2 days according to Rabbi Eliezer. There he's talking not supposed to wear tefillin. But we have psukim. We have psukim that are. And even though the psukim are only in the smachta, it must be Allah Moshe Sinai. So
There you go. Anything you don't know, it's Allah.
There we go again. So Alma the Ikala Mechish, Dilma Amri Bishnei Yamam Harishonim Nami Hinichtzon. So a person, so it's not that he'll mix up the days, or maybe he will mix up the days. He'll think it's a Shnei Yamam Harishonim. But Rashi says if he wears on the third day, someone might think that he wore the first 2 days. You have a good kasha. Why? Or unless he'll mix up the days. But that's not Rashi. Rashi says he won't mix up the days. He'll actually think that if he's wearing today, he might have been wearing yesterday. And what about tomorrow? Why is tomorrow any different? I don't know. So you're asking very good. Okay, let's see the Gemara weiter. Omar Rav Masna, my time with Rabbi Eliezer. What is this for of Rabbi Eliezer who says it's 3 days? Tichsiv vayitnu yemei, plural, b'chi eval Moshe. The days of the Avelis for Moshe ended. So Yemei is plural. So you see that for 2 days, there's Avelis. Rashi says, the mashma shnei yomim. It's mashma the ikra Avelis is 2 days, and that's why you don't wear tefillin. My time to Rabbi Shua, who says the ikra Avelis is only 1 day. The chsiv v'achrisa ki yoim mar. So you see that the end of days, when someone's Avelis, it's only 1 day. It's singular. Rabbi Shua nami haksiv vayitmu yemei b'chevel Moshe. So you see it's 2 days. Amalach shiny Moshe the talk of Avli. Moshe Rabbeinu was a gadol b'Torah. He was the Moshe Rabbeinu. For him, maybe the Avelis was 2 days, but you can't bring a riot to everybody else that Avelis is 2 days. Rabbi Elazar nami haksiv v'achrisa ki yoim mar. Does it not say that it's only 1 day of Avelis? So tomorrow, Ika Marira Chadaymahu. Avelis is 2 days, but the main bitterness, the main pain is in fact only the first day. About Amar Ula, Halacha Rabbi Eliezer bechalitza, Halacha Rabbi Shua behanocha. So Hanocha Rashi says, Hanocha the Sheni Mutter Lanich Tefillin. Rabbi Shua holds you're allowed to wear tefillin on the second day, but Allah Rabbi Eliezer that you don't have to take off your tefillin. You don't have to take off your tefillin on the third day. So Rabbi Eliezer says on the third day, involve panim chadashis, you don't have to take off your tefillin, and we pass like Rabbi Yeshua that you wear tefillin on the second day. But the question is, what happens if someone comes on the second day? Do you have to be chayletz? That we don't know, right? So that's what we have to figure this out. So Amar Ula, V'sheni Le'ula, on the second day Le'ula, where you're normally allowed to wear tefillin, chayletz or ain't chayletz. Since we only said Halacha Rabbi Eliezer b'chalitza, and Rabbi Eliezer only says on day 3 you don't have to take off your tefillin if a guest comes. What about day 2? According to Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Yeshua does say himself that on day 2 you do have to take off your tefillin if a guest comes, but we don't have a psak l'gabi that. So we're tashma tamula chayletz umaniach afilu meyapam. You have to take it off even 100 times. Every time somebody comes, you got to take it off and put it back again. So therefore, you see that we paskin on day 2 like Rabbi Yeshua that you'd have to take it off. Tanya mihachi Yehuda ben Tema Omer chayletz umaniach afilu meyapam. Rava says no. Kivin sheniach shuv and chayletz. Rava holds on the second day according to Rabbi Yeshua you're allowed to wear tefillin. You don't have to take it off again. So I just want to point out. I just noticed Rashi says it's all about panim chadashos. So it seems like if someone already saw you yesterday sitting shiva not wearing tefillin, there's no problem. It's only a problem if someone's coming now to be menachem who never saw you as an yet. Only for such a person would there be a problem.
Yosy.
How could Rabbi say?
Yosy.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was just wondering. In those days, they wore tefillin all day. So I'm just wondering, is this referring to wearing tefillin all day? Is there any chiluk?
Yes, it is.
Is there any chiluk for davening or not davening, or?
No, I think this is referring to people who wore it all day.
So, but is there any chiluk? Is there any chiluk in this in terms of tefillah itself?
You mean on the second day? Should you?
Yeah.
Our minig is to wear.
I know what our minig is, but I'm talking about referring to what the Gemara is talking about. Like
no, the Gemara is speaking about people who wore tefillin the whole day.
Right. So they're saying when they don't wear it, they're referring to tefillah also.
We wear it in the first day. Yeah.
I'm saying when they say not to wear, they're referring to tefillah also.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
I said when they're saying not to wear, they're referring to tefillah also, or just during the day.
Yeah, even for tefillah, they mean you shouldn't wear. Yeah, okay. I believe so. Could you say it again? Right? So even on the second, even if you hold there's 2 days, part of the second day. Oh, once you don't wear tefillin a little bit, so that's good enough. I hear it. Okay, okay. So before we go weiter, Toshus talks about some other minhagim that they had then that we don't have nowadays. So it's okay. I just want to run through it quickly. Elu devarim she'avul asbim. Hachalei chashav dvarim she'mitzuv aleim. The list, and Rashi mentions it as well, the list that we're talking about here is not comprehensive because it's listing off the things that you're not allowed to do. It's not listing of things that you have to do, the positive things. Because like Kfiyas Hamita, Batifas Harosh, that's not listed in our Bryce over here, not because it's not relevant, it's because our Bryce is the Asr Behen. We're only listing off things that you're not allowed to do. The Bryce is not listing off the things that you have to do as a positive. So it's also been like Tefillin, I'm sorry, the also been Tefillin Ushel Shalom, Loy Chashiv. It doesn't mention Tefillin Ushel Shalom. The Einza Kol Yemei Eibel, because those don't apply for all 7 days. So that's why they're not on the list. And Tachboishes it doesn't mention. Washing clothing, it doesn't mention that that's prohibited because that's included in the Rechitza. Avagav the little Maisi Trey Kroy, even though we learned it out of 2 different sukkim, the Rechitza and the Tachboishes, Avalhani, the Lenoihagen, Kala Shavua, Loy. But the things that don't apply a whole week, like a film, Shelo Shalom, those were not listed in the Brisa. Lafukim appears Sharash appears, Shabin Shmuel Hayamater, La'oval, Lasos Malacha, Achagimel Yom. This would not be consistent with the Ra, who says that the Shmuel used to be mater and oval to do malacha after 3 days. If that was the case, then it shouldn't be in this brisa, because Tosfos is saying that the brisa only lists off things that are relevant to all 7 days. The brisa says also be malacha. So Tosfos discusses why don't we wrap our heads, wrap our faces in a shmata, in a burqa, uchvias hamita, and Kviyas Hamita, which we learned earlier. We rely on that the Gemara says in Yerushalmi. Guess why? What does that mean? Pirish mechashiv. If we did Kviyas Hamita, people would think that we're making some type of kishuv. So that's another reason why they didn't do it anymore. We live amongst the goyim. Tosfos is talking about his times. And we have goyish workers who work for us, and if they see that we make ativas harosh, and if they see that we make kviyas hamita, they'll think we're trying to cast some type of spell on them, and it could lead to a danger. And then the second reason we learned was because our beds are built differently. I'm not sure. Let's see Tosfos then. But
yes, excuse me. Sorry, I don't know what a tifas rosh is.
You wrap your head in a shmata to cover your face.
Oh, okay.
Like a mask. Tosha says it would look like a joke. It would look like we're dressing up Purim thing. If you're wearing a mask, it'll make you look foolish. So because of that, that's why we don't do it nowadays. Instead of creating a somber mood, it's going to create more of a funny atmosphere. So Tosfos has different stories why nowadays we don't know. So Dr. Golda is asking, nowadays would goyim think we're going to be making kishif if we turn our beds over? I don't know, but but in those days, in the medieval times, where Tosfos was, and the Yerushalmi already said it. Once they stop it, we're not going to pick up on it again. I hear. Listen, a lot of COVID spread by shiva houses, so it's very appropriate. Okay, so let's see the Helig Gemara Vayta. Frag the Gemara. How could Rava say Kivin Shiniach Shuvin Chaylitz, but Rabbi Damar Lacha Katan Didon the Amar Shloisha? Didn't Rava say earlier that the Lacha is like our Brisa that says Gimel Yamim Ikra Velis Hachanami Neboy Gimel Yamim Nilniach Tefillin? So you should also have 3 days. So how could Rava paskin like what we're saying, like Rabbi Yeshua, and after the first day you could wear your tefillin, you don't have to be chayla to it. Rava holds you can't even wear tefillin for the first 3 days because he holds that the avelus is 3 days. Halacha is kind of damar shloisha. So Gemara mitzvah shiny. Rava who passes like a mishnah and says you need to have 3 days before a yom tov in order for the yom tov to be vat lavelis. That's the regular hilchos avelus. But mitzvah shiny, like tefillin is a mitzvah. You're allowed to put it on the second day. So Rav is interesting. He holds that Ikar Velis is 3 days, and that's why unless someone's had shiva for 3 days, you don't say that Yom Tov is mafsik Avelis. Nevertheless, the tefillin you could start wearing already on the second day. Taner Rabban. Ovel Gimel Yom Harishonim Asa b'Malach. He's not allowed to malacha Even an ani who desperately needs the money is not allowed to work for 3 days. You can do betina, b'seich beisa. Well, isha and a woman who's an avela, tova bepelach b'seich beisa, she could spin. If you remember, we learned pelach is the right way to do it, right? That was the most professional way to do it. She's allowed to spin properly, right? We had spinning on your thighs and spinning on a rock, and now we are spinning with the pelach. She's allowed to do it properly, but as long as it's betina in her house. An oval himself doesn't go to be menachem oval somebody else for the first 3 days. After the first 3 days, he can go be menachem oval somebody else. But the eino yoshiv b'makam hamenachamin, he doesn't sit where the guests sit. Ela b'makam hamisnachamin, he sits together with the avelim. Very interesting. Tosus brings down the kan ve'ela choylech, which is the second Tosus on the Amid. Pirish b'Tosus Arav. Balzeh soimchin. It's on this halacha that the Gemara says that an oval after the 3rd day can go be menachem novel. Based on this, we're soimich shaboim b'beis hakneses b'Tisha B'av. This is why avelim who are in the shiva come to shul on Tisha B'av, because we look at it like it's a base oval. Then yudeya imu minik toiv. I'm not sure if it's a good minik for people who are avelim to come to shul on Tisha B'av. Midvarav matzinu l'meiden, but from the words of Tosus Harav, who says that there's such a minik, you could learn shechoshev Tisha B'av kamoila acher shloisha. Tisha B'av has to be like after 3 days. V'nafkamina li'in tefillin k'dipirash. So it must be that I'm not sure exactly what Tosus is saying, because what did the Gemara say? He says Aval Gimel Gimel Yisham Eina Halach L'Veit Aval B'Kam Veilach. So this is talking about the Aval that's going. The Aval can go be Menachem Aval after he's 3 days. The Gemara is not addressing the person who's being Menachem Aval, how long he's sitting Shiva for, right? The Gemara is not talking about how long the person going was sitting Shiva for. But Tosus over here says, I'm not sure what that means. And what that means is that going on Tisha B'Av, even during the first day of Shiva or the second day of Shiva, is considered like our Gemara's case going to somebody else after the 3rd day. Now, I'm not sure what that means. I guess it's saying you're allowed to wear tefillin, because it's like the 3rd day, you're allowed to wear tefillin. Okay, Zok to Gemara weiter. He's not allowed to say shalom to somebody. From the 3rd day till the 7th day, Meshiv, he's allowed to answer if someone tells him shalom, but he's not allowed to initiate saying shalom aleichem to somebody. After the Shiva, he can say shalom to others, and he could respond if someone says shalom to him. The first 3 days, in fact, the Gemara of Tanya we learned, the children of Rabbi Akiva died. And I'm a little bit unclear here, because it says Banov, which sounds like plural, but we're going to soon see it was only one son. So I'm going to have to ask you to look at the art scroll, because I wasn't sure what's going on. But let's learn the Gemara first. But Banov, Pashtus means more than one son. But we're going to see from the Gemara, like I said, that it only means one son. Nichnesu kol Yisrael v'spidim hesped goda. A huge oilim came to be Menachem Oval Rabbi Akiva, or came to Levaya, and I assume Rabbi Akiva was maspid them a great hesped. So the hispidum is also mashma that he's talking about multiple children. Okay, the shas p'tirosan, when the people left the Levaya, Amad Rabbi Akiva al safsul gadol, he stood up on a big bench. The Omar, and he said, Achenu beis Yisrael, my wonderful brothers, Shimu, listen. Afilu shnei bonim chasanim, even if I would have lost 2 children who were chasanim, so who older children, afilu shnei bonim chasanim kavarti, even if I would have buried 2 children that are chasanim, nevertheless menucham ani meroiv kavod shasisim. A menucham who b'shvil kavod shasisim. Now, vim b'shvil akiva basam, and if you came only because of me, because you wanted to be Muhammad me, that's also a good thing. Because I rekama Akiva b'shuk. There's many Akivas in the shuk that you didn't go to. You came to Akiva who's teaching you Torah, elakach amartem Torahs eloikov beliba. And therefore, since you came to be Mechaber Torah, the kol shekein shescharchem kofel, kol shekein your schar is double, l'chu levateichen l'shalom. So you see that Rabbi Akiva, right on the first day, was saying shalom. You're not supposed to give shalom the first 3 days. So Gemara covered the rabbim shiny. There it was covered rabbim. Okay. But the problem is he says, even if it was 2, mashma there wasn't 2. Even if it was 2, I would still, even if it was 2 chasanim, I would still be menuchim. Mashma that it's not. Mashma now that it's not. So what does he say?
Yes,
Well, give me 1 second. I'm also telling you what it says in our school.
there was 2.
Oh, so he does say it was 1.
No, sons? It was 2
sorry?
sons. You're asking how many sons?
Yeah, so it seems like
2.
Why do you say that?
So, the sons of Rabbi Akiva, plural.
But the problem is it's mashma knowledge.
It translates it as plural.
I'm sorry?
It's translated as plural, sons.
I think I saw in the Rashi Ksavyad. The Rashi Ksavyad, it says. So if you look at Rashi here in Rashi Ksavyad, it says Menuchamani Merov Koach Asisam B'chol Shekain Shaloi Kavarti Elo Echad She'ein Echad.
Yeah.
The Rashi says
the note in Art Scroll says that Rashi says it's 1.
Right, so that's this Rashi over here. So that's what I was confused, because at the beginning of the Gemara it says Akiva was buried Banov, but here clearly Rashi is saying it's only 1. So I guess Banov means Benoy. Maybe there's an extra yud in there.
Yosy.
That's why I was a little.
I have a different question. The Shiloh of Shalom or giving Shalom is usually greeting somebody, right? Here he's sending them off. So isn't that different?
I guess he's still saying l'chulu v'techem l'shalom. So I guess that's the Gemara still consider that a greeting.
Mm-hmm.
The Gemara seems to still consider that a greeting. Yeah. Well, saying giving shalom, telling shalom aleichem is a bracha, right? So Zok the Gemara weiter. Migimel ve'ad zayin. We also said that from after the 3rd day until the 7th day, Meshav, there you could respond ve'in a shayla. And the kan ve'ilach, and after the shiva, shayla Meshav kedakah. If someone finds a friend who lost a loved one, right? So if he's within 30 days of the nifter, then then you're menachem over. You're not allowed to shoyel b'shalom on another. Once it's past 30 days, then shoyel b'shloimah, then you could be shoyel b'shloimah, and it's too late. You're not menachem over anymore. There's a very famous story with someone who's saying Kaddish in the Bais Medrash. And someone goes over to him and says, Yankel, what are you saying Kaddish for? So he says, I lost my wife. So he says, you lost your wife? You lost your wife 10 years ago. So he says, yeah, but I remarried. Oh, Mazel Tov. So sometimes when it's too late, you're not supposed to be Menachem Ovel anymore. So you no longer are Menachem Ovel. Mesa Ishtoi. What if his wife died? This is the Maimar Muskar, that's what we're talking about. And he married a second wife. Then Eina Rishoy Likanis Lebeisoi Ledamar Ibat Tchumen. Right. Rashi says if she died during the Shloshim, the person being Menachem Ovel, he's married to a new wife here. Right. Yeah. Well, the Gemara discusses why he was able to get married so fast. The Gemara says if he wasn't Mekayim, could go in Shein Leibanim, could come on. Yeah, but he didn't have children. You know, I have a different story about that. But I'm up against the clock. So what happened was, you know, I have someone come be Menachem Ovel. Here he's married to his new wife. Someone cannot come be Menachem Ovel and say, "Oh, your wife was so special. She was so wonderful. You'll never find anybody like her." Right? That you're not supposed to do if he's sitting there with his new wife there. So but if you meet him out of his house and his wife is not there, then you could say quietly and softly, then you could be Menachem Ovel him a little bit and talk about maybe what a wonderful wife he has, because that's not directly in front of him. Amar Abidi Ba'avin. So the question is how could you be shoyel b'shloimoi, right? Let's see the Gemara. One second. No, we didn't. I don't think we have to the kasha yet.
You're not allowed to show
Mechlal d'shayli b'soich lamidjoyim. So Rashi says you see from here that you're allowed to be shoyel sholem b'soich lamidjoyim. The kasha l'man detoni b'soich lamidjoyim ain't a shoyel. So we said over here, the eino shoyel b'shloimai. We said you're not shoyel b'shloimai only la'achel lamidjoyim. But we said earlier that you are shoyel b'shloimai even after the shiva. So Zakta Gemara Amar Bidi Bar Avin who shoyel b'sholem acherim. After 30 days, he's allowed to be shoyel. After the shiva. After the shiva, he could be shoyel for shalom acherim. Why? Because acherim are shurim b'shalom. Other people did not just go through a tragedy, but acherim ain't shoyel b'shloim. So when we learned back over here that after the shiva, mikan velach shoyel meishav kedarkoi, that means he's allowed to be shoyel because he's speaking to people who are not available. But people shouldn't be shoyel b'shalom to him because he is another. But ain't shoyel b'shalom, shoyel nishar b'shalom. With the Katani Meshiv, it says shoyel after shiva he can be shoyel and Meshiv kedarkoi. If it says Meshiv machlal the shalinu lei, so tomorrow in Echanami it's the loyadi. The people who are being shoyel b'shalom to him after shloishim, they didn't know they were shoyel b'shalom. He's allowed to answer them back. If it's before the shloishim. If it's during the shiva that they're shoyel b'shalom, he has to tell them, "I'm sorry, I can't be meishiv because I'm in the shiva." But after the shiva, during the shloshim, if they wrongfully are shoyel b'shalom, he doesn't have to correct them. He could just answer them and not have to make a big deal about it. In fact, the more ihachi hasam nami, I was by the shiva as well, right? If they tell him he should answer back. So before the shiva is up, if someone tells him shalom wrongfully, he has to tell them, "I'm sorry, I cannot answer you." And he cannot answer. Once it's past the shiva, if some let's see Rashi. So let's see Rashi. The loyadi, Kloimer, how the Tony the Meshiv, that the Rashi says earlier, you could be Meshiv, Lahani the Shoylele, the loyadi the Evahu. They don't know he's a novel. Avaman the Yoda the Evahu, the Shole besoich lamidjan. Anybody who knows someone's a novel should not be shoyel shalom within 30 days. If you're saying that, when can he be meishiv in the shloshim? That's if the person who said shalom to him didn't know, and that's why he doesn't have to correct him. Then afilu gimel yamim nami meishiv. Even during the first 3 days, you're right, because we learned Tanu Rabbanan of gimel yamim rishonim asher b'shel shalom b'shloshim atshiva meishiv ein shoyel. So vice versa, it's only the first 3 days where you're not even meishiv. So Mati's right. So the first 3 days you're not meishiv. So the first 3 days, you have to tell him what he has to do. If someone gives him a shalom, he has to say, "I'm sorry, I'm a novel. I can't give you shalom back." After 3 days, then you could give him shalom back. You don't have to tell him that you're a novel. But after 3 days, if someone didn't know, you can just answer back and let him shalom. That's already a shaila of pikuch nefesh, right? Even in Krishma you're allowed, right? Yeah, so it shouldn't be worse than that. Okay, so let's see the Gemara Vayter. So let's see where we're up to. What if you encounter your friend who's an oval and he's within the year? So it must be his first parent, what the Gemara is going to say. Medaber imei tanchumin, up to 12 months, you could be menachem oval. The eino shoyel b'shlom. La'ach yud b'schodesh, shoyel b'shlom, ve'eino medaber imei tanchumin, aval medaber imei minatzad. You could be medaber imei minatzad, what Rashi says, shoymelei tisnachem, ve'eino maskashem emeis. So you can wish him a nachama, but you don't have to get into the details. But that's going to be the Gemara's kasha. That's going to be the Gemara's kasha. That's the kasha. Meir, what if someone gets into the details of the Avelis after 12 months? What would you compare him to? Someone who never broke his leg, and it finally healed. He bumps into a doctor. Come to me. I'll break it again. And and you'll see I'll heal it for you. Kidei sheteido, so you should know shesamamonim shalu yofin. So you can see that I'm a good doctor. So someone who's going to go and drag the guy down after the person finally got over his availance, he's finally passed the year, and drag him into it again. He's like a doctor who wants to break someone's leg. But I'll call upon you see here that it's for 12 months. That you're not supposed to be shayl b'shleimai, and we looked earlier at 30 days. So haba ava v'imai by ava v'imai, it's 12 months. Haba shar karavim where it's only 30 days. Hasam nami frekti imara ibazoi hasam nami yidaber imai tanchumin minatzad. We said earlier that after 30 days you could not be menachem oval anymore at all. Yet by the parents we said that after 12 months, even though you shouldn't be menachem properly, but you're allowed to be medaber imay minatzad. So why aren't you medaber imay minatzad for a different relative after 30 days? So when the Brisa said after shloshim by a regular karev, you're not medaber imay tanchumen. That means a regular nichem avel. Avo medaber imay minatzad. But you are allowed to wish him nechama without getting in to the mace itself. During the first 3 days, if the oval didn't make it and he came from a close place, so he joins the family. He doesn't have to start from scratch. Shiva, he joins the family where they're holding the second day, third day. But if he came from a far place, he has to count for himself Shiva Shleiman from the day that he arrives. If he shows up after the third day, then afilu bami makom karev, even if he came from a close place, he has to start Shiva over. He has to start his Shiva from when he comes. Rabbi Shimon Aimer, afilu baba yom hashvi mi makom karev. Rabbi Shimon is Mekel says even if he shows up on the last day of Shiva, but he came to makom karev, moina imayin, he could join them.
Where's the main place?
I guess where the family is sitting, where the mace is. Rashi moina imayin im ha'avelim sheba isamakim. So it seems you go busser where most of the people are. Amamar, Gimel Yomim Harishonim, the first 3 days, Ba Mimakim Karev, Maini Imayim. Amakli Ba'avin Rabbechanan, here's important, which we'll answer a little bit. Your Shaila, Wu Sheyesh Gadol Habayis Bebayis. What does that mean, Rashi? Sheyesh Gadol Habayis Bebayis, Shabo Mata Gadol Habayis Bebayis. If the oldest sibling is there, so that I guess what anchors the Shiva, then he's Maini Imayim. Then Maini Imayim Mavela Habayis. And the person who came was a younger sibling. But if the older sibling was not there for the beginning of the Shiva, and he came within 3 days, he still has to count for himself. If the older sibling was sitting Shiva, then if someone else came, it's considered like he could just join in. But the oldest can't join in with the other people. So therefore, he would have to start from scratch. Okay, I guess we should stop here. Yes.